Good morning. Please let's give a minute to other participants to enter the webinar and then we'll start.
Let's start, Guido. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Good evening. Thank you for joining us today in this new webinar of the World Coffee Producers Forum. I want to thank everybody who is attending this event, this webinar. We have as World Coffee Producers Forum, as producers, as industry, as a group, as a family in the coffee value chain. We understand every day more and more that we have to act as a group, as a chain. We need to address the challenges that lie ahead of us in a very thorough and cooperative way. And part of that is what moved this group and the group in the meeting before producers and this group to join us today to tell us what they see as experts going on in the coffee value chain and what they see is the future when this COVID-19 crisis is over. We have representatives of countries and regions that represent the whole chain, basically. From we had producers last time. Now we have more on the industry side. So we have the roasting industry, we have the traders, we have the coffee shops, we have the retail part of the coffee value chain. And basically what we try to do is to give everybody comprehensive view. As we said before, there's so much information out there, so much confusion, contradicting information, that what we try to do is to have the experts, the ones who know and have access to a lot of information, to a lot of people, talk to the whole chain all the time, tell us what they see now and what they see in the future. We chose an arbitrary date for some of the questions you will see today, at December 21st, 2021. The reason for that is that nobody knows when the new normal, whatever that means, is going to be in place. So we chose when you see the questions, okay, what is going to happen? How do you see the coffee world after December 31st of 2021? We have a very interesting group of panelists. Let me go first to logistics and to a few announcements. One is we have an interesting presentation that we will upload that came from the All Japan Coffee Association. When this is finished, we will upload the whole webinar. We will upload the presentation. In addition to that, there will be a presentation by the All Japan Coffee Association that submitted a presentation. The agenda we're going to go through is logistically going to be, we're going to have the presentations. We're going to have, after each panelist, we're going to have a few questions, like it's polls the only intention of them is to indicate, they're more indicative, what this group attending the webinar is thinking. It's not a very expansive poll. We have at this point 212 people connected, but it is a poll done to people, answered by people who are knowledgeable of the coffee business as everybody who is attending the this webinar. So we're going to go over the each panelist, and then a few questions, one or two or three, depending on the moment. And what I want to ask from you is that you please, when you answer the questions, all the participants, don't forget to click submit. So the answer goes to Guido, and he can process it. He process the whole thing. In some cases, you will one or two questions you will have to scroll down to see all the answers. But that's part of the it's a limitation because of the size of the screen. You will see the results in percentages once you answer the questions. You will see the results in percentages on the screen. Quickly going over the agenda. You can put the agenda on the screen. We're going to start with Bill Murray. He's going to be our first panelist, the CEO of the National Coffee Association, NCA. Then we're moving to Nicolas Tamari, who is the chairman of the Swiss Coffee Traders Association, SCTA. Then we'll go to Yanis Apostolopoulos, who is the CEO of the Specialty Coffee Association in the US and Europe. Then Fernando Serpa, who is Vice President of Global Sourcing, Latin America, and Fresh Food at Walmart Inc. And on top of that, Fernando is also a very knowledgeable person in sustainability matters. Takao Ishima, who is Executive Director of the Specialty Coffee Association of Japan. Paul Rook, and welcome Paul to the coffee world. We just joined the Executive Director of the British Coffee Association. And Yoon Sun Lee, who is the CEO of Terra Rosa Coffee in the Republic of Korea. But she's also a very, very strong leader in the coffee world in Korea. We're going to have some closing remarks and some view of the market by our CEO, Roberto Vélez, and then we're going to have Fred Kawuma invite us to the third World Coffee Producers Forum is going to take place in Rwanda in July of 2021. Fred, as you know, is the Secretary General of the Inter-African Coffee Organization that groups all the coffee producing countries in Africa. And after that, we're going to have a Q&A session where you can send your questions in writing. We'll group them. We'll send them to the. Please indicate which panelist the question is addressed to, so it makes it easier to send it to the right person, and then we'll be finished. So thank you very much. Welcome everybody. We're going to start with the first round of questions. It's going to be 3 questions. This is intended to show us how the audience is made of. I mean, how many people we have and which areas they represent. Don't forget to click submit. So we have very mixed composition today. We have a group of producers, 20%, exporters 9%, trader importer 13%, roaster 7%, sole manufacturers, NGOs 17%. So it's a very diverse group. So I think it's going to be very interesting panel. Go ahead, Guido, please. What are your 3 main concerns in the current crisis regarding the coffee value chain? So please choose the 3 that you think are the most significant ones in the current moment. Okay, economic sustainability of farmers is the biggest one, followed by low international prices, I think, and excessive volatility, the third one. Okay, thank you very much. So now we move after the third question. We move to no, there's another question. I'm sorry. This is an interesting question. We're trying to have an answer to, which is kind of indicative. What do people think when will people regain trust? It's more about trust. When are you willing to be sitting in a coffee shop or restaurant full of people to have a cup of coffee? This is not exactly how much the virus is spread, how much people are sick. It's when do you feel that you will be able to go back to have your cup of coffee in a coffee shop or restaurant? So I guess the main answer, when I feel safe, followed by when scientific community tells you when to go back to coffee shops. So thank you very much. Now we're going to have Bill Murray start with his presentation. I want to again recommend the presenters to stick to the 10 minutes, and the Q&A will be the session at the end. So Bill, please. You're muted, Bill. You're muted. You have to unmute yourself. Bill, you're muted.
Yes. Okay. How's that? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. I clearly need another cup of coffee. So thank you. I would like to thank you, Juan Esteban, Roberto Velez, everyone at the Federation for the opportunity to be part of this important webinar series. My perspective is really one of the consumer market here in the U.S. I'm the president of the National Coffee Association of the U.S. And while, of course, we are concerned about every aspect of the coffee supply chain, my expertise and my focus is really on the U.S. market. I think the question that we're asking today, what is the coffee world going to look like at the end of the year? It's really the right question right now. We've really been asking a bunch of very difficult questions over the last 8 weeks. The first questions that we heard from our members, very simply, how do I keep myself and my family, the people that work for me, how do I keep everyone safe? Health. The health question was the very first question. The second question was about business continuity. Can I keep my business open? Should I keep my business open? How do I keep my business open? The third question was about economic assistance. We know that the impact on businesses in some cases has been absolutely destructive. So the next set of questions was, what sort of government assistance is available? Can I access that assistance? And now we're starting to see different questions. How do I reopen my business if my business is not open? Or, and this is the question we're asking today, what does the future look like for the coffee world? This is a particularly difficult question. The impact of this disease in the world of coffee is not a lot different than the impact of the disease on people. We know that some people, they have the disease, they have no symptoms. Other people, they suffer and they die. 100,000 people in America have lost their lives. We know that some businesses have been completely destroyed. And we know in other cases, Amazon, for example, or Zoom, more people are using Zoom. Or if you are a toilet paper manufacturer, your business is taken off. So when Juan Esteban asked us the question, what's the coffee world going to look like? One of the difficulties in answering that question is where you are in the world of coffee, what exactly your business is. And I think what we're facing ultimately at a very high level, at a very macro level, is a question of rebalancing. How does the coffee world, how does the consumer world rebalance in America? And let me explain what I mean in a little more detail. We know that grocery stores have never been busier over the last 8 weeks. We know that the restaurants and the food service businesses have nearly been destroyed in some cases. Some conservative predictions say that 20% of the restaurants in this country might disappear. So as we look at this rebalancing, where people are moving, where the impact is, the question is overall, what is going to happen at a very, very large level? So I would look at a couple of indicators. We have a sister organization, the Green Coffee Association. The Green Coffee Association every month issues a report about warehouse stocks, how much coffee is sitting in a select group of U.S. coffee warehouses. If you look at their most recent report, January, February, and March, you'll see that the numbers are not that drastically different from last year or the year before. So one indicator suggests that overall, at a very high level, the coffee volume, the volume of imports is relatively unchanged. Second, if we look at consumption, the situation is clearly unprecedented. We've never been here before in our lifetime. But if you look at consumption patterns, coffee over the last 8 years, 9 years, they are very, very, very steady. When you ask Americans year after year after year, what did you drink yesterday? The percentage variation in people drinking coffee is very, very small. Year to year, you see 1%, 2% more coffee, less coffee. You compare this to things like soda, for example, tea, other beverages. Coffee is clearly at the center of what people are drinking. When you ask them how much coffee they're drinking, again, over the last 10 years, on average, the average coffee drinker drinks just over 3 cups of coffee in the U.S. Again, this changes very, very little year to year. So my sense is that when you look big picture, I don't see huge macro changes in the U.S. market. But then when you start to look at a more granular level and less macro, we, of course, are seeing crazy changes. I've heard from some of my members that in the 3 to 4 weeks, right after some of these shutdowns started, they lost 90% of their food service business. Almost instantly, they went from having a very healthy business to having no business. Similarly, and these are anecdotal numbers, we've heard from some companies that the grocery business for coffee was up 30%, 20%, maybe 40%. So when I talk about the year of 2020 as one of rebalancing, we are not the airline industry, we're not the hotel industry. In those cases, there's simply no more business, none. There's none to be had. Coffee is different. The question for coffee is, what are the adjustments that consumers will be making, and what will the impact be, not just on the businesses, but on the people who make up these businesses? So I know Nicholas is going to address this in a moment. What I've heard from my friends who are coffee importers, who are traders, who are brokers, the last 8 weeks have been one of frantic activity, moving coffee from one place to another, from a place that they expected it to be to a place that they did not expect it to be. In some cases, customers are asking to delay delivery of coffee, but we're not seeing huge changes. Keep in mind that before this pandemic, 80% of coffee drinkers said that they were drinking coffee at home. And on top of that, about 36% of coffee drinkers said that they drink coffee away from home. These numbers can be tricky because we drink coffee in multiple places and they don't add up to 100%. But the point really is this. For most coffee drinkers, when they are forced to stay at home, when they're locked down, 80% of them are already drinking coffee at home. And of course, we know that when they're drinking coffee at home, they're now making an entire pot of coffee. They're no longer just purchasing one cup. And so very definitely there's a potential here to see a minimal overall impact on the coffee market. But of course, there's a lot of pain that's happening in the economy right now. We're seeing record levels of unemployment. We're seeing officially there are something like 20 million people out of work. Unofficially, there are closer to 35 to 40 million people who are not working, and all of a sudden. So I think as I close, I think I've got a couple of different questions for myself as I think about the future. It's not overall, are we going to see a huge macro difference in the coffee market? It's what type of coffee will people be buying? If they're unemployed, if they're having difficulty with their finances, will their economic situation impact how much they're willing to spend on coffee and the type of coffee they're purchasing? How will the out-of-home experience change? You know, before the pandemic, about half of coffee drinkers who are purchasing coffee out of home were going to the drive-thru. Will we see a lot more use of apps and drive-thrus? Perhaps that is our future. Will the in-home experience change? You know, a couple of years ago, we saw the single-serve machines take off in about 2 to 3 years. Maybe we'll see the same thing with bean-to-cup machines or other types of opportunities for consumers to enjoy coffee at home. So I'm going to sum up. I'm going to stop right here. I know we have many other panelists, but to say very simply, we're going to see a massive rebalancing in terms of outlets and what people are buying overall. People will be drinking their coffee at roughly the same levels, but there are many things we don't know about how that rebalancing will take place and what the impact will be on the individual players in the market. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, very much. Bill touched a very important subject, which is not just how much coffee will we be drinking, but which kind of coffee will we be drinking in the future. And this is part of what comes in the next polls, not this one next, but down the road, some of the polls have questions about that. What do people in this webinar think? Guido, so let's move to the questions. We're going to have 3 questions. I know that there are kind of silences there while people answer, but there's nothing we can do about it. So let's start with the second poll question they're indicative again to show what people in the audience think of what's going on. When the current crisis settles down, and we are in the new normal, December 2021, do you believe that consumption will increase, will decrease, will stay the same, or I don't know? Most people think it will stay the same or will increase. In fact, if we were to add the people who think will stay the same or will increase, we go to 76%, which is a highly positive expectation from people. Then we'll go into what are we going to be drinking, not just how much. Next video. When the current crisis settles down and we are in the new normal, in December 2021, do you believe that production volume will increase, will decrease, will stay the same, or I don't know? Okay, most people think it will stay the same. Interestingly enough, as I said before, between stay the same and increase, we have 60%. So it's kind of an optimistic approach, at least to volume of production. Next kilo, please. Do you believe that the commodity future exchange, ICE or LIFE, for instance, fairly reflect the price of physical coffee? Okay, most people believe it does not reflect the physical coffee price. It's interesting because in the past forum we had, this is 79.21, the other one was 81.19. Same approach, but the percentage was almost the same. Basically, the producers were gonna. Okay, now we move to Nicolas Tamari. Nicolas is the chairman of the president of the Swiss Coffee Traders Association, SCTA, based in Geneva, and that groups the traders of the world. Basically, everybody sitting there, not just the roasters and so on, but people who do the trade. So, Nicolas, thank you very much. Nicolas, also the CEO of Sucafi.
Thank you, Juan, and good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I hope you are all healthy and safe, and I'm lucky to live in Switzerland. The country has been opening up in the last 2-3 weeks, and now we have about 50-60% of the people coming back to the office. And being back to normal, quasi-normal, or to have a more normal working environment is a true pleasure. Social interactions, especially in our industry, are crucial. And I want to give a lot of courage to the ones who are still in quarantine or confined. I'm thinking specifically about some African nations, South America, obviously, and North America. And I encourage you that the light out of the tunnel is soon, you will be back to a more normal life. I'd like to thank the organizer. I think it's amazing that a producer forum organizes such as a webinar, and it's an example how we don't need to take a plane and travel across the world. We can do a great meeting through platforms such as Zoom. SCTA stands for Swiss Coffee Trade Association, and we represent the coffee merchants. We have about 50 members. And coffee is very important for Switzerland because it represents roughly 1% of the Swiss GDP. Every year, as some of you know, we organize a forum and a dinner. It's the first week of October. Unfortunately, this year our dinner is canceled, but we will do a virtual forum, and I invite you all to join our virtual forum beginning of October. I was asked to talk for 10 minutes this morning about 2 questions. How do I think COVID-19 is affecting our industry? And the second question that I'll touch later on is, when the current crisis settles down and we get back to a new normal, what would have changed? The first thing I want to say on COVID-19 is that no one really knows. And I encourage everyone to use common sense when taking decisions and to sticking to the core values and vision of your organization. Too many people are taking decisions by fear because of the unknown. I am very proud to be a coffee merchant because the last 8 weeks have shown and proven to the whole coffee supply chain about the important role of a coffee merchant. And our role is to be the bridge between producers and consumers. Some of our customers have asked us to delay deliveries, others anticipate the coffee, others ask us for accommodate new payment terms. And I think the supply chain overall was extremely resilient. This crisis is affecting producers and consumers. And it's pretty unusual that the same crisis affect both the grower and the consumer. The way we feel as merchants has affected the most our business is the lack of interaction and work with coffee growers in producing countries. COVID-19 is genuinely delaying sustainable investments on the field, on-site visits. The workshops are now frozen and all the training are being put on hold. I believe this is challenging the climate change mitigation plan agenda, and people are reallocating resources to other projects. I feel that the most vulnerable people in our supply chain, which is the farm workers, the pickers, and all this temporary workforce, is the one most affected. While coffee is still flowing out of producing countries, I think the pace of the flow of coffee is slightly slower. We've all lived and seen that the out-of-home consumption is down. On the other hand, the in-home consumption is higher. I believe Bill talked very nicely about the rebalancing. And this switch is temporarily halting the premiumization trend that was driven by the out-of-home channel in the last decade. We're switching more to conveniency and maybe to cheaper qualities of coffee. I believe another big impact of COVID-19, which I consider positive, is going to be the digitalization of our supply chain. We have been, like you, for the last couple of weeks, working from home successfully. Why do we need a bill of lading that is a paper document? Why the bill of lading shouldn't be a digitalized document? So I firmly believe, and we're living already, the switch to a more digitalized digital supply chain and moving to more blockchain-based solutions that are developed around. The second part of my question is, when the situation settles and we have a new normal, I think Juan decided December 2021, what do I see are the changes? I believe the last few weeks have accelerated the e-commerce, and it was not common to buy coffee through the net, or for me it wasn't common. Now it's becoming more the norm. And I think this digitalization will increase the need from consumer for traceability and for transparency. And I think technology, like we are organizing this webinar, will help us to increase transparency and traceability. I am confident that consumption is resilient. I think Bill spoke about it previously, and down the road, consumption of coffee will continue to grow. Maybe 2020 we will stall, and maybe there will be a switch in qualities of coffee, but overall, when you consume a better coffee, it's hard to downgrade. And I'm confident that coffee consumption is resilient and that premiumization will continue. A big impact, and I think this is very important, we've seen that emerging market currencies have seriously devalued against the US dollar. And I'm specifically referring to the Brazilian real that devalued about 40%, the Colombian peso to a lesser extent, 20%. And I think this will lead for a bigger market share for the big producing countries like Brazil. And we will depend more and more on the bigger producer, and there could be a consolidation at the expense of smaller producing countries that are dollarized. Today, the New York market, in the question of Juan, 70% said it doesn't reflect the price of coffee. I think if you had asked the question, does it reflect the price of Brazilian coffee, 80% would have said yes. And we live in a market where we start having a decorrelation between physical and futures. A good washed Arabica coffee trades at 50 cents over New York. A good Brazil natural trades at 20 cents under New York. So you have a 70 cents quality difference for commercial coffees on a commodity that costs 105 cents. This is absurd. Something has to give in. I believe that as well, the concentration will happen at the merchant level, where smaller merchants will have to merge together because banks are becoming much more difficult to finance us. And the same could happen for independent coffee shop chains and or specialty coffee merchants. Last but not least, we're also seeing that medium-sized mainstream commercial coffee roasters that are publicly listed have a market cap that is extremely low. And I think one of the impacts could be further consolidation in that segment of our industry. So thank you very much, everybody. And that's my reply to the two questions.
Thank you, Nicolas. As you all can see, this is the great thing to have this very knowledgeable group of people. It gives you very interesting views of things, and the halting of the premiumization is one of our biggest concerns as producers, as high quality producers of coffee. So let's move to the next poll. Question is going to be one question, which is related to what Nicolas just said. When the current crisis settles down and we are in the new normal, do you believe that specialty or higher value coffee's demand will be higher, lower, the same, or I don't know? Again, we're thinking, how is it going to look like in a year and a half? Not necessarily today. In a year and a half, it's going to go back to normal, it's going to increase, decrease. What's going to happen? At this point, we have 309 people connected. So it's going to be interesting to see what the answers are from different sectors. Most people think it's going to stay the same, but as you can see, it's very divided. So that tells you how big the concern is. Although between higher and the same is the majority, there's a big concern about it being lower, and in terms of the higher value coffee to decrease its demand. Thank you. So let's move now to Yanis Apostolopoulos. Yanis, as you know, is the CEO of the Specialty Coffee Association that groups specialty coffee industry from all over the world, and have they organized, had to be canceled this year, like everything else, I guess, the biggest specialty coffee event in the world. So please, Yanis, thank you.
Yes, Hello, everybody. Thank you, Juan Esteban. It's really a pleasure and an honor to be with this group of people here today. As Nicholas, I was asked to talk about what is the impact of COVID-19. And I would like, first of all, to take that moment to say that we know that on every crisis, either it is a pandemic crisis or a financial crisis that comes after a pandemic crisis, the two weakest part of every value chain are the ends. And we've seen that impact both in producing side and in consuming side on small, medium businesses and baristas. So on SCA, because I would like to put some data on the table, we conducted a survey to just measure the community impact. And I want to present a couple of slides out of those results, just to be the context on the conversation. And we recently presented a report that we produced together with Square, which is one of the biggest, I would say, technology and POS companies in the US. And it's mostly focused in the US, but the US being one of the biggest consuming markets in the world can give you a bit of the data to understand how, I would say, buying patterns has changed on a retail level. So I will start by just presenting a couple of slides about that community impact survey. I would like to say, first of all, that this survey, just as we go through the main key points here, we had around 1,000 respondents, and out of those, 50% identify themselves as retailers, roasters, so small, medium businesses and coffee shops, and 15% as roasters and wholesalers. Around 60%, they said that they had at least one outlet, and 66% were coffee shops. So you got a good understanding how consumption has been in coffee shops. And 35% was coming out of the US, and the rest was all over the world, like the UK, Europe. So we have a good representative, I would say, sample, not indicative sample, but a good representation from all over the world. And the US had a significant majority, being the most, like the leader in consumption. So what is interesting here is on the results, what is the perception? And what people were saying is like 62%, they think that their cost will increase by 50% to operate their business. And what is really interesting is that 68%, they have already experienced a decrease in sales for above 50%. And as you understand, that brings small, medium businesses in a significant, I would say, pressure. On my next slide, though, there are some key words that were popping out when we asked them, what is the primary source of that increased expenses? And as you see, it's all peripheral. It's supplies, cleaning, but nobody is mentioning coffee or I would say the main supplies that you need to operate. It's like extra cost that comes from direct relationship with COVID. The staff and labor, yes, the percentage goes up when your turnover goes down. And then we asked them, have you identified any particularly effective strategies to mitigate what you see as a downturn in your revenue? And you've seen there is nothing here that pops out significantly. You see like free shipping, delivery, online. So you see that people are trying to experiment to what was Bill, Mari was saying earlier, trying to find new ways to distribute their product and sell their products. So I think that gives a good understanding of what's happening out there. What is really interesting is which sales channel have been impacted. And you see with the green is a significant decrease in sales. So you see the consumers, the sales to consumer in person, like the walk-in, has completely almost gone away. It's decreased by 80%. There are very, very few cases that that mention that they had an increase. What we see is a minimal change, either to the positive or the negative, on 50% to selling online, but we see also a significant increase there. And finally, sales to businesses, so the wholesale business of coffee has decreased significantly. So those are the changes when it comes to how channels have been impacted. Moving forward, I would like to focus a bit on the report that we launched with Square. And that might give you a bit of a data of what has happened during COVID time in terms of what has increased, what has changed. The key findings from this report tell us that we have seen significant increases both on curbside and pickup purchases. And you can see that I want to focus on this one, 520% increase in number of coffee sellers offering curbside pickup. So we've seen a lot of coffee shops changing their business models from just the traditional walk-in to try to offer a different way to continue operating. What is really interesting here is an increase on delivery options, and you see that 90% like of the Square coffee sellers start offering delivery, and 340%, they saw 340% increase of their sales. If we go down a bit, because somebody, I think Bill was mentioning about where the prices are gonna go. It's really interesting to see that the average order size went up from $8.41 to $10.50 per order. And that's from March to April. Maybe that has to do that more people were offering curbside pickup or deliveries, but it's a significant increase. It's a 25% increase on the order size. And what is really interesting is subscriptions and the average price of subscriptions being at $14.25. So based on this data and based to, I would say, personal experience I had from the 2015 crisis in Greece, where the GDP collapsed by 10% and unemployment skyrocketed on 30% there as well. It was a period where we saw that the coffee consumption went up, because coffee was like the affordable luxury. It's a moment of pleasure that people had, and I think that we need to be looking at the future, not with too much pessimism, but with a bit of optimism that even during financial recession that we are experiencing now, and we don't know how long it might last, coffee it's very resilient as an industry. So I want to say that on our survey, impact survey, we did have data for producers as well and producing countries. I feel that there is too much representation on this panel about producers, so I'll let other people speak. But we're working on developing a survey that will be exclusively targeted towards producers, so as to get a better sense of the feedback. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Yanis. Okay, it's good to see an approach which is kind of optimistic, and the example of the Greek crisis in 2015 gives a little hope that things will not be that bad for high quality, high value coffees. So let's move to the next poll. It's only one question, 30 seconds, and then we move to our next panelist, who is Fernando Serpa from Walmart. Do you think that in the current juncture, independent certifications add value to producers by increasing their income, add value to the environment and social indicators, add value to the industry by delivering information and means to better invest sustainability resources, add value to the industry by allowing them to charge more for the coffee, add transparency to the value chain, add value to the consumer by guaranteeing him or her that part of the price they pay will go to sustainability, other not mentioned above, or do not add value. Let's see, this is also pretty divided, and I guess the biggest one I'd like to the consumer by guaranteeing that him or her that part of the price they pay will go to sustainability. I guess followed by a transparency to the value chain. Thank you very much. Let's move to Fernando Serpa from Walmart.
Thank you, Juan Esteban. I want to thank the World Coffee Producers Forum for the invitation to take part in this forum. We were already invited 2.5 years ago to Medellin, and it was a pleasure to be there. I like the way you started, Juan Esteban, saying we should look at the coffee business across the value chain, and that's, I think, what we should do. I will start by providing a backdrop of the Walmart coffee business. I'll talk about the changes we see in consumer behavior, the impact on supply chain and consumption, and some thoughts on how to get back to the new normal. But first and foremost, as Nicholas said, I hope everybody is well and safe. The news we hear and read from different parts of the world as the virus goes south, if you will, are not very encouraging. What we hear from Latin America, Brazil in particular, and Africa. So I hope all of you and your families are safe. For Walmart, as a matter of fact, the health and safety of our associates has been a priority. Without our associates being safe, we wouldn't be able to provide the essential services in the communities we operate. That's why we implemented new operating protocols that take into consideration social distancing and hygiene practices that we learned to begin with in China when the virus hit China in January of this year. And we have been able to roll out those protocols in all of our other markets. We introduced emergency leave policies. For our associates, we have paid additional bonuses so far, over $500 million in the US. Of course, we're also caring about our customers, again, with adjusted operating procedures and expanded express delivery, pickup and delivery, just like the coffee chains are doing, as Yanni said. Touchless options is another one that we have increased, and we are working and partnering with all of our communities, as well as the local and state and national governments in the countries we operate in. So to give a little bit of why Walmart talks about coffee, Guido, if you could move to the next slide. Coffee is actually one that fits very well in our purpose of offering everyday low prices on a broad assortment, anytime, anywhere. Walmart sells about between $4 and $5 billion worth of coffee in the different markets we operate in. We partner with a large range of suppliers who are present in both our virtual and our physical shelves. You see some of the names there, all of the big names that you would expect, the Starbucks, the Folgers, Gevalia, Green Mountain, Maxwell House, Community, Massimo, Zenette, Nestle, Bustelo, and you name them, we have them there. We are particularly proud of our private brand coffees. Sam's Club's Members Mark has a long history of success, not only in coffee, but in general. That's a brand, the private brand that we use at Sam's, and in coffee, we've been very successful. One of them we show there, the Colombia Supremo offering. On the other hand, in Walmart US, 3 years ago, Walmart made a strategic decision to improve our private brand offerings in food and consumables with focus on improving quality. Coffee was one of those. And so we ran a full overhaul of how we manage the business. We started with a deep dive to understand our coffee customers and segmented them. We adjusted specs. We engaged Q graders to assess coffee submissions for premium single origin offerings. On our back coffee, we embarked in sensory and analytical testing. We changed packaging. We redesigned our modulars. We changed or re-engaged our private brand manufacturers. This was a 2-year process, and it's paying off. Walmart subscribes to the shared value philosophy. It's an integral part of how we do business. We believe that by seeking value for customers, associates, suppliers, communities, and shareholders, and the planet, we create more value for all, and we will all be better off. Along those lines, we have a robust social, environmental, and governance framework. As part of that, as we talked about in Medellin, we have committed to sustainably source 20 agricultural commodities by 2025, and coffee is one of those. We follow a methodology of leading, influencing, and collaborating. For example, in coffee, we lead directly by sourcing all of our private brand coffee with sustainably, now with certification, a goal that we achieved ahead of schedule late last year. We continue down that path by focusing on traceability through blockchain technology, as we do it with our partner, Westrock. We also have some clout and some influence with the big branded manufacturers and others in the industry. So we exert influence in the right direction, looking to tackle coffee hotspots like water, livelihoods, smallholders, and yields. We also collaborate and did so when we joined the Sustainable Coffee Challenge or our partnerships with NGOs. We reinforce all of the above with our philanthropic work. And it has paid off. We have engaged more customers and added value and added to the conversation. Our customers have rewarded us with their preference, and our private brand sales have grown substantially over the past 2 to 3 years. Since we were in Medellin, we have significant double-digit growth in our private brands. The link at the bottom of this slide speaks more about our coffee journey. Let's talk a little bit, start talking about the COVID crisis in coffee, how we see it. The first thing I would see after these past 3 months, and it's widely known, is that there has been a huge shift from the bricks and mortar retail to the online channel. This is both a threat and an opportunity for coffee. As you know, coffee, different to what Nicolas said, coffee in general is one of the top online grocery categories. Maybe Nicolas doesn't buy it yet online, but it's been big. Over the past few years, many months in a row show coffee items among the top 10 sellers in the main online platforms, be it Walmart, be it Amazon, be it others. That's a great thing for the industry, but it's also a threat as the online channel grows dramatically. All other food and beverages categories are going to be fighting hard to increase their presence there. The second point that is valid across the board, and also Yanis remarked that this was true in the food service business, is that the average size bought by customers during this past 3 months has significantly increased. That's to be expected, as they want to minimize the number of trips they take to the store and they buy larger sizes. So instead of the 24-ounce Folgers can, they buy the 48-ounce. Or for the K-Cups, instead of the 12 K-Cup, they buy 48 K-Cups or even 96 K-Cups. What's been interesting is, although this spike started happening early in March, we haven't seen that come down yet. So that would that could lead you to think that this is happening because the consumption that used to take place at work or on the road is happening now at home. Other interesting consumer behaviors related to coffee or around the coffee category include strong consumption of soluble coffee. I mean, soluble is still, you know, a fraction of pods or roast and ground, but it has maintained. An interesting one is a spike in the sales of coffee filters because people are using them to build face protecting masks. And coffee machines, which is one that we really like because we know that if people buy their machines with us, they are more likely to get coffee from us. So I see 4 specific distinctive changes in consumer behavior, and they are on that slide. The first one is the channel shift that I started talking about a minute ago. The 3 lines you see there, it's hard to see, but basically the one at the top reflects purchases online. The one at the very bottom is purchases in retail, and the one in the middle is the sum of those 2. And this is up to the end of April. So when you see the difference between the top and the bottom is 40%. So at one point earlier on in the crisis, 40% of the purchases of the U.S. consumer were moved from bricks and mortar to online. That's a huge shift, and evidently nobody was able to deal with it. Not Amazon, not us. We were just overwhelmed. The changes in the way people work, with so many more people working from home, staying at home, the contactless economy, all of that plays out in that channel shift. The second one that was very important, and it still has an impact, is the change in category mix. So people went from buying a wide range of merchandise, including apparel, including general merchandise, and they moved right immediately to buying first and foremost cleaning supplies, and then right after that food, especially packaged food, and then a little bit of slowly but surely fresh food. And then when the stimulus money started coming, people started buying more entertainment kind of products, electronics, and also products to help their children learn at home. This change in category mix is going to be interesting to see how it plays out. The third change in consumer behavior is driven by the hit that the food service channel took. Every industry whose business model depended on gathering more than 4 people is in terrible shape. Schools and companies closed. There's no more cafeterias, no more restaurants, neither fast food nor fancy ones. And that ravaged supply chains. And Yanis talked a little bit about that. I'll expand into it. The fourth one that people are not yet talking so much about, but I think it's an avalanche coming our way, is basically the drop in purchasing power. The information I remember, Bill, is different from the one you quoted before. I think the US has registered officially over 38 million unemployed. And if you add to that, the gig economy is probably closer to 50 million. In Europe, there's an unemployment rate close to 8%, 56 million jobs at risk. And I believe that this is going to take a long while to play out. So people are going to be very careful on how they spend their money. And if you add to that the uncertainty that there's around, I think people are going to think twice about spending $3 to $5 in a tall latte. Let me move on to the next slide, please, Guido, and talk a little bit about how I see the food service channel evolving. And again, Yanis has a lot more information than I about this, but just to tell you how we look at it from our angle and how the supply chain was disrupted. The food service channel represents about, depending on the food category you're in, about 50% of the total outlet for the agricultural food business in the United States. It's more or less depending on your category. If you are in the protein business, for instance, About for eggs, about 20-25% of your outlet is through the restaurant business, food service. If you're in beef and pork, about 50%. If you're in seafood, is 70%. So those supply chains have really been ravaged. Same thing for, in certain instances, for fruits and vegetables. We found really images that were despairing when you had many farmers who were not picking their crops because it didn't make sense for them to pick their crops, and at the same time there were hundreds of thousands of people in the food banks trying to get food. So this distortion between supply and demand really came to view with the crisis. Now, the chart on the right, taken from McKinsey, there are all kinds of charts from all kinds of people. I chose to take a look at this one from McKinsey that looks at the food service business by type of restaurant. You see people who sell pizza to people who offer fine dining. Obviously, the ones who sell pizza continue doing an okay business, whereas the people who are in the fine dining or casual dining business have seen their businesses drop from 70 to 85%. Coffee here is shown 60 to 70%. I just took note that Yanis was saying that over 68% of the people in the specialty coffee business who replied to his survey said that their sales had declined by 50% or more. So I think this is a reasonable number. How will this play out? I think it's a complex question to answer. Coffee overall is in this picture, is in a bit of a, not in the easiest positions. I'm not in the prediction business, but I do have insights and observe trends and can talk about ranges and spectrums. And before anything, I think the food service business, we should think that the food service business is one piece of a much bigger puzzle, and coffee is a smaller part of that puzzle. That puzzle will be reshaped by some tectonic dynamics that have to do with health and safety of the population, of the different populations and different local segments of population, how governments respond to the public health and economic crisis, and it'll have many, many variations. There are lots of people, there's a whole industry now that does scenario planning and they look at, is it going to be a V, is it going to be a swoosh, is it going to be a W, is it going to be a ladder? The McKinsey guys or the IHS guys, which I both respect, have different scenarios. The one that McKinsey paints is one in the middle where a recovery will take quite a bit of time to happen, and that will have an impact in coffee consumptions. So that brings me to my last point. If you could move to the next slide, Guido, please. And it has to do with some ideas for the road. Again, it's not about predictions. I think fortune tellers are better than I at that. But it's, you know, people like us observe consumer behaviors, gather insights, spot trends, and talk about ranges and scenarios. With that in mind, I think that attitude is better. Instead of trying to predict the future, we can try to shape it. Maybe we won't succeed, but it's a more constructive frame of mind. So let me share a few thoughts. Again, none of them earth-shattering. The first one has to do with returning the food service business to stability. Yanis and Bill and others can talk about this much better than I. There's plenty of advice on how to gain back consumers, how to add new ones, how to change operating procedures, and so on and so forth. The second one is about increasing digital engagement. What we saw again in China, and China is probably the country that is the most advanced in digital engagement, but even as advanced as China is, with the crisis, during the crisis, the digital engagement of Chinese consumer grew, depending on what source you look at, between 20 and 30%. And this is China, which was already very high. New consuming occasions. We see that people are going to be staying home more than what they were before. They're going to be less on the road, less in their offices. What about thinking of the lunch occasion. The numbers I remember seeing about the drink that Americans have when they have lunch at home for coffee is less than 3%. Whereas you have at the top, you have tap water, you have bottled water, you have sodas, you have tea. I think there's an opportunity there to be looked at. And again, that's just one. There can be many more, because I think we need to look for new consuming occasions. We need to also look for tools to enlarge physical and digital shelf space. Everybody, all of the food and consumables categories are going to be doing it. So coffee cannot, it's going to be a tough competition for the share of wallet or share of stomach for the coffee category. We have to think about quality and value. So yes, to cups of excellence, to single estate coffees, to barista contents, and think value, because as I was saying before, more people are going to think twice before spending $3 to $5 in a cup of coffee. The environmental sustainability and governance credentials that coffee has are unique. Coffee lends itself so well for this one. And so one more way to engage with the consumer is to play up these credentials, issues like water, deforestation, smallholders' livelihoods, and more. All of that call the attention of consumers, of manufacturers, and of the public opinion. Coffee should leverage this. And then there's a final one, which brings me back to the first point that Juan Esteban was making, which is that people that are part of this forum should work together. I remember when we were in Medellin, I was sitting two seats away from my fellow panelist from Starbucks. I forget his name now. A gentleman who had dedicated his life to the coffee business. I met him when he was in East Africa in the 90s. He's the one. He was one of the forces behind the Starbucks coffee farms, and he was attacked by a few of the participants in the forum. Blaming him personally and Starbucks for all the bad things that were happening to coffee. I don't think that's a constructive attitude. I don't think that's going to be very helpful. I think if you know, it's going to be tough out there. It's going to be very difficult for all food products. And if we don't work together, if we don't partner with the likes of the Starbucks and the Keurigs and the Nestles and Sucafinas and Esteves of the world, it's going to be even more difficult. As long as coffee's main use is to make drinks, as long as there's no other use for coffee, if we come up with caffeine as an ingredient for a vaccine or for cleaning materials or what have you, we have to work with what was out there, and with that maybe help shape a faster arrival to what will be the new normal. And I'll pause there, Juan Esteban. I'll be happy to take questions afterwards.
Thank you, Fernando. Fernando, very much. It's a very enlightening presentation, and I guess I got it from this that crisis give you the opportunity to shake things as a value chain, as a group, even the things that were not working well before the crisis. So I guess this juncture is one that will give us the opportunity to work together and see how we can improve the coffee value chain as a whole, giving a better experience to consumers, and certainly make the life of producers much better working together. So let's go to the poll number 5. We have one question, 30 seconds. Don't forget to push submit. When the current crisis settles down and we are in the new normal, do you believe that out-of-home consumption will increase, decrease, stay the same, or I don't know? Again, this is after the whole mess has settled down. So most people believe it will decrease the out-of-home consumption. It's 52% believe it will increase or stay the same, and 45% believe it's going to decrease. Thank you, Guido. Let's move to the next group. We have at this point 332 people attending the webinar, so it's a good group to take this pulse. So let's move to Mr. Takao Ueshima, who's the Executive Director of the Association of Japan. Japan being one of the most important markets for quality coffee. So Ueshima-san, please, the floor is yours.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Takao Ueshima, Executive Director of the Specialty Coffee Association of Japan, from a consuming country. On April 7th, the state of emergency in Japan was declared and once extended and relieved in metropolitan area just yesterday. The economic activities will be expected to be resumed from now on. During this time, stay home was requested by the government, and all office workers have been working at home with the telework without going out, which means no coffee at the office, no coffee in between sales activities, no lunch outside, no drinking meeting at night. As you know, the drinking meeting at night is very popular in Japan. And all the entertainment place, public amusement, sports gym, restaurant, and bars have been all closed during that time. And the coffee shop and the coffee drinking part of the micro roasters shop were almost closed. And their sales were down to 10% of normal level, which means a 90% down. However, many people staying at home are drinking coffee at home during the telework. So sales of roasted ground coffee and roasted beans at shop and supermarket are increased very much, as well as the sales of online web and mail order sales were increased very much. So it is said that the 30 to 50% increase in this area, which catched up the coffee drinking sales decreased portion. It's said that the commodity sales of which were increased in Japan, even in this pandemic time, are coffee at home, wine at home, and DVD cinema by the Amazon. After especially the shops and the micro roasters who have a good product lineup of good specialty coffee and who have good relationship and trust with fixed customers have good sales continued. After COVID settled, living style and working style should be changed, which is a new normal life. Say, let's go out, more telework, less outside, sales activity, less drinking meeting at work, after work. So as a result of these things, there's opportunity to go to coffee shop, restaurant, and bars. There's opportunities for customer and for shop, both sides. Then what will happen after COVID-19 is customer will carefully choose better coffee shop, better restaurant, better bar with the good lineup, well-skilled staff, better hospitality and good atmosphere to where a customer really want to go after the long absence of the COVID-19 period. I think in the coming normal new life, customer will shop carefully where he would like to go to have a good coffee, and selection of coffee will be accelerated. Therefore, shop owners should prepare their shop with good imported coffee beans, excellent roaster, well-skilled baristas, talented shop staff with deep and wine knowledge and ability to explain them to customers with total hospitality. In one word, I'd like to say that the shop should have the professionalism after the COVID-19. Professionalism is the originally medical term, so it is very difficult to determine. But if we apply it to our industry, professionalism is firstly well-trained knowledge, skill, as well as the capability of explanation, and so on. So, and the most important thing is a trust relationship between customer and shop, trust relationship between shop owner and the supplier and producer. So in order to prepare for new normal life, from the SCAJ association point of view, in consuming country, we should train present professional member for more professional, say the professional among professionals. As I'm thinking, as the association should make our seminar higher level, make our competition higher level, make our exhibition more informative, so and so, and train our member to have the professionalism. And we'd like to our member to have their shop, which will be chosen by customer to go to the coming new normal life. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ueshima-san, for your view on the Japanese market and what lies ahead for us. We're going to go back to a couple of questions before we move to Paul Brook from the British Coffee Association to give us a view on what's going on in that market. How do you believe the coffee chain can support the economic sustainability of farmers? A, pay better prices and premiums. B, promote and funnel resources towards social investment projects to benefit farmer communities. C, promote the expansion of independent certifications. D, promote and funnel resources to increase farmers' access to funding and technology. E, promote and funnel resources to increase consumption in producing countries and emerging markets. Thank you very much. We have the first pay better prices and premiums to farmers that plays to economic sustainability of farmers, which is one of the main topics that the World Coffee Producers Forum has been advocating for the value chain to work together on that in that regard. The second would be increased consumption, which is another one of the topics that we've been pushing, and we think it's very important to continue moving in that direction. So let's move now to Paul Rook, from the executive director of the British Coffee Association. His view, what's happening in the market. I'm sorry, we have some more questions. Origin concentration. When the current crisis settles down and we are in the new normal, you believe that coffee production will be in fewer origins, in more origins, in the same number, or I don't know? The same number is what most people think in this group, followed by fewer origins. That tells you a little bit how difficult it is to predict what's going to happen in the future. But these are all educated answers from people close to the coffee world. Let's move now to Paul Rook. Paul, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Juan Esteban, and thank you to you and your colleagues for the invitation and my first opportunity to speak as a member of the coffee community. I'm going to concentrate on the British market and look at some of the challenges and how we get to December 2021. So we have a few slides, and if we can move to the next slide. So first, I just want to look for those that may not be familiar about where the UK market was before we entered this pandemic. So we look at the beginning of the year, and some figures suggest that the UK is now consuming about 104 million cups per day. That would equate to roughly 2 cups per person for the population over the age of 18. And the industry is responsible for 152,000 jobs in the UK, and has a turnover of 11.2 billion pounds. To give some idea of numbers, there are approximately 450 roasters in the UK, serving around 25,000 coffee shops. And a number of other people have picked up on the consumption issue. But for the UK, consumption is still predominantly at home, even before the pandemic, so 53% at home. 38% of the consumption is at work, whether that's through work cafes, through vending machines, etc. And 19% was in cafes and restaurants and the hospitality sector. But in the period 2015 to 2019, the value-added contribution of the industry has risen by 44%. So on the next slide, we look at where that value has been added. And you'll see that the vast majority of that value is actually added in that out-of-home market. That smaller segment of the overall consumption market, but one that has been growing consistently over the last few years. And you'll see the rest of it is predominantly in roasters, in wholesalers, in the retail sector, a very, very small amount, 0.4%, in coffee trading companies. And if we can move to the next slide, this shows the growth in that out-of-home market over the last 7 years for the figures that we have available. And if you look at the solid bars, you will see that there is a very steady growth over that period. The line then shows you the year-on-year growth, and whilst there have been some little sort of peaks and troughs in that, the average growth is 5.75% per year. So that's where the market was as we started 2020. Now, if we can move to the next slide, we'll look at some of the challenges of how we get to 2021. Now, obviously, very specifically for the UK, we have still the issue of Brexit. We haven't in the UK talked about it very much for a few months, but we are now starting to again. That raises issues of tariffs, import and export. It raises issues for the industry of different legislation compared to the European Union. And so it increases the issues of cost and cost increases on the final price. But there is a question mark and a question in my mind, as Juan Esteban said, I'm relatively new to the coffee market or the coffee industry. And it raises a question in my mind about whether that actually offers opportunities for particularly for the roasting sector in the UK to increase their share of the marketplace. Obviously, and we've talked about it, I think your first webinar talk probably much more about it, is we have the continuing challenges at origins. And clearly throughout the world, we're moving at slightly different timetables in terms of where the virus is, whether it's still rising or whether it's falling in its impact. So we have question marks over availability, over supply, over logistics, and the availability of some of the specialty coffees that are the most popular and growing part of the market, as we saw earlier. And some of that will obviously continue through into the next round of harvest into 2021 for some of those areas. We also still don't know what the recovery of the economy generally is going to be. And one or two other speakers have already mentioned this. And actually, a lot of the issues that Bill Murray talked about from the US market, as where we are at the start of this webinar, are also very relevant for the UK market. But clearly we have, and again, one or two people have mentioned, challenges to the economy, an increasing unemployment rate, and questions over when some of those jobs will return. Importantly, we have questions also over the strength. I think one person mentioned labour, and clearly, again, for the UK, and particularly at the coffee shop end, we have a lot of people working in coffee shops, a lot of baristas who have come from outside of the UK. Some of those have returned home ahead of the virus. Some of those have returned home because of Brexit. And there is a question mark as to how many of them will want to return after this is over. Indeed, in their own countries, they may decide that they have better opportunities in their own countries than coming back to the UK. So we have the question over the purchasing power of the consumer. Again, that's been questioned already. How much money will people have in their pockets, in their purses? We have tended to focus on this phrase of affordable luxury as far as coffee is concerned, and certainly something we put out as BCA in social media. And we do believe from a UK perspective that a lot of people will want to return to their coffee out of home, and indeed a lot of social media talks about what people are missing and what they're looking forward to when they can get back onto the high street. But clearly, a lot of coffee shops operate within other retail sectors, and it's a question as to how successful that retail area as a whole will be, as to how successful the coffee shops within that will be in terms of the number of consumers coming through the door, and therefore the money they can make. Coffee shops and all of our members across the whole range will also have to look at the costs of operating the business. There will be issues of rent. Many coffee shops in particular are rented. Very big issues at the moment about the position of landlords and the money that they're losing, and the position of tenants and their ability to pay. So again, as a number of people have already mentioned, this question of how do people adapt, how do they innovate? We know that a number of shops and indeed smaller roasters who didn't have an online presence before the virus have now created an online presence and are doing quite well in terms of sales through the online system. But there are other ways that people will have to look to innovate, and I think Fernando mentioned it a few moments ago. but it will revolve. And I think Yanis also looked at some of that in some of the work that SCA is doing. Will it be around food? Will it be around other opportunities? In the UK, coffee shops have been used as almost as internet cafes, and have allowed people to reside in the premises for quite a long period of time, just buying the odd coffee. Will that continue? Will it be able to continue? Or will owners actually believe that it's not now a good business model? And this big question about what is the new normal and how does it compare to the old normal, and that's something that we will all be looking at across all the different countries. So if we can move on to look a little bit at the wider coffee sector. The question as to where is coffee being consumed, and I refer you back to the chart that we had earlier on that looked at out of home. And I think similar to some of the work that's been done in the US, we are seeing an increase in the amount of coffee that's being consumed in home, whether that's as beans, roasted beans, whether that's as a capsule, whether that's as ground coffee, or whether that's as instant bought through the supermarket chains. But it raises the question as to how much of that change in where coffee is being consumed will continue through until 2021, and therefore how much will business models and supply chains need reworking. And certainly within parts of the industry, whether it's the roasting, whether it's wholesaling, we have some companies that are very focused on the out-of-home market, some very focused on the retail market. They will have to look at how they can rework that model, perhaps to have a wider consumer base. And that is the question about how that will impact on the number of roasters, the 450 figure that I talked about earlier on. And it does raise the question, is concentration the natural consequence of this? Well, I think one speaker suggested that it quite could well be, as far as that roasting sector, as that trading sector is concerned, particularly in terms of smaller businesses having to come together. And I think that is something we could well see in the UK going forward. So if we can move to the next, and I think this is probably the last slide. A question for me as to where does this pandemic leave the consumer values, and I mean by that the sustainability values that have been very prevalent in the UK and other markets. Is the ethical consumer still alive and well? Well, some of that comes back to their ability to pay, their priorities. You know, if they have been laid off, if they are now unemployed, have their priorities changed, or do they still put sustainability issues high on their agenda? And I think this is a challenge for the whole industry, and it's the same challenge whether you are sitting in a consuming country or a producing country. Because I think the messages that we have been trying to put out haven't gone away. The audience may be distracted slightly at the moment. But my question, and as somebody that has come in and seen the industry a little bit from the outside, is does that mean there is actually now an opportunity for more collaboration? And again, it has been mentioned once. And I'm thinking more amongst the organisations. Do the organisations, and you have a number of us on the call today, on the webinar today, do we need to take more of a proactive lead together in looking at how we get some of these messages across to the consumer to get them to understand the future of the product that they like, that they enjoy, that they want to continue to buy, and the impact that is having all the way through the chain. And I would question it's not necessarily just about price, it's about a number of other factors as well, but it all comes down to how do you build a situation where ultimately that producer has the income that is necessary for them to continue to operate and ideally to sort of thrive. So I would like to leave that as my sort of closing sort of thought, and maybe something that we come back to either later today or at another occasion. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul, very much for your interesting insights on the British market. Let's move to our Next, Paul, that's it's one question, 30 seconds. And then we move to Mr. Yoon-Sung Lee, to Mrs. Yoon-Sung Lee in Korea. When the current crisis settles down and we are in the new normal, do you believe that the concentration of the coffee roasting industry will be more, less, the same, or I don't know? So what we will do afterwards is we're gonna have Ms. Yoon-Sung Lee give us out the Korean market's approach. Korea, as you all know, is one of the fastest growing consuming markets. It's a very interesting phenomenon what's going on there, in terms of not only in terms of how much coffee is being consumed, but about the quality of the coffee being consumed in Korea. So I think it's going to be a very, very, very educational and an interesting presentation. When we finish the presenter, we're going to have then some comment from our CEO Roberto Vélez, and then Mr. Fred Kawuma, who is going to the Secretary General of IACO, talk to us about the next World Coffee Producers Forum. Most people here think that the industry will be more concentrated, and between more and the same is going to be about 76%, less 20%. Let's move to Ms. Yoon-Sung Lee for her presentation, and then we'll do the final comments from Mr. Vélez and Mr. Kawuma, and then we move to the Q&A session. I think we're running out of time. We'll not be able to put all the questions because there are so many questions here. We'll try to group them and make sure that the panelists can answer the question we're looking for. So Yoon-Sung, please, the floor is yours.
Okay, hello everyone. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to here. And as you know, the Korea situation is quite different when I compare to others. You know, the Korea, we are very normal actually. First, when we have coronavirus on February, I mean, during that moment, our government never blocked our business, or just the schools and university, they just stopped not to have a lot of patients. So as a business side, Korea is still working. We never stop. So last 3 months, our economic situation not so great, but still we are moving. So let's say in case of a small business like a coffee shop or restaurant or other tiny individual business, we are decreased, but we are still working. I think this is a big difference between Korean and other country. So let's say last 3 months, February, March, April, all the business sector is not great. But let's say most of the business guys, they said like most serious case, 50% decrease. So we can say for coffee business between 20 to 50, but still we are working. So right now, let's say from the May, especially our government start to give us some kind of a coronavirus relief fund. So for the small business persons, we start to have this kind of fund from the customers. So this fund is only for focus on the individual business. So people start to use this fund for the restaurant or coffee business. So as a retail side of coffee, still we are moving. And I do believe Korean coffee market will be increased more than before. I cannot say right now we can increase a lot, but this year, let's say we can keep the same volume. I do believe all the small guys, include me, like a specialty coffee company, we want to keep our quality also. So I think in generally Korea coffee market, we are okay, a little bit decrease, but we start to get over all of this situation. But one thing, as a buyer from now on, I'm worried about the exchange rate. As someone said before, for us now it is time to buy green coffee from Central America or Africa, like a new crop. But exchange rate is very different to last year. So let's say Korean money very weak against the US dollars. So we start to have a lot of stress because of this. So let's say it can affect it a lot to importer and roasters who has direct trade from the origins. Maybe it can be affected. But in my opinion, let's say there is no middle between the roasters. So it means there is only like a big company which has enough money to buy, and very tiny like small business guys who want to keep the business. And then also the many customers, after coronavirus, we learned we need more space not to infect each other. So many customers inside the coffee shop, they visit, want to drink coffee, but they want to, they prefer to visit more big like a space, the coffee shop. So let's say very tiny coffee shop, they start to have a new system by online or by delivery system and something. So they try to find their way to survive. And then big company start to set up the different way to make a space, more bigger space between customers. So I think we are slowly change to adapt it, the coronavirus situation. And then everyone says about the online sale. Korea is the same. Before, we used to drink coffee, most of us outside home. But after coronavirus situation, online sales start to increase dynamically. And many, I think the customers start to have some chance to drink at home, not only out of home. So let's say home consuming of coffee start to increase, and still it's increased not only from us. I mean, all of the roasters, they said, whenever I met them, always they said online sales start to increase a lot. So I think it's very general situation. And then I guess after coronavirus, I mean, new normal, maybe we can keep this kind of situation. So everyone knows that, you know, Korean market is a new market for coffee consuming. So I think still we are growing, and consumer want to drink a cup of coffee, and we can edit more coffee for home consuming. That's what I expect from Korea. And you know, for the Korean, usually summer vacation is kind of a peak time to sell a cup of coffee. I mean, iced coffee. So we expect, we used to expect a lot of customers during the summer vacation. But this year, I'm not sure we can have same like visitors, number of visitors, because many big companies like Samsung or LG, they already push to the all employee to use their holiday during the, you know, coronavirus situation. So I cannot say, you know, we can have the same situation like last year for vacation time. But because of the corona situation, no one can fly outside of Korea. So many of like employees or laborers, they start to set up their vacation plan to stay inside of Korea. So during the summertime, I guess many of retail business can recover the loss of last 3 months. So I think we can keep the same quantity and same quality of coffee. That's what I expect. And I have some retail shops also in Korea. And in case of our company, because I'm not like a big company in Korea, so I'm a reader for specialty coffee, but as a volume side, we are very tiny. So let's say Korea, we used to import 2.3 million bags in case of 2018 totally, but for the consuming and then the bags of importing from origins, I hope we can keep at least the same number or a little bit increase because of the increase of home consumption. Yes, that's it.
Thank you, Yunson, very much. We're going to move to hear a few comments from our CEO, Roberto Vélez, for different reasons. As you know, you guys know the Federation, we're a little bit of everything in the sense that mostly we are a farmers association, we're a coffee growers association, but we also have a coffee shop chain. We're an exporter ourselves. So we kind of suffer all the ups and downs of everybody. But our main goal is to improve the livelihood of coffee growers by having Colombian coffee, be consumed more and more in the world. I'm not pitching for Colombian coffee. I'm just explaining the view, because we wanted our CEO, to Roberto Vélez, we all know, to let us know a little bit what he thinks about the panel, where you think things are going, very briefly, before we move to Fred Kawuma and the Producers Forum in Rwanda.
Thank you, Juan. First of all, let me thank from the bottom of my heart the participation of all the panelists today. I think we all agree that this has been a wonderful webinar. I from my side, I've never been in something like this. It's been incredible. We have had the opportunity to hear from every aspect of the industry. And let me also thank dearly our office in New York, Juan Orduz, Guido, Juan Jose, for organizing such seminar. It's unbelievable to be able to have a glaze at the whole industry today, as we have seen today. Today, I think one thing is clear. More than ever, since Medellin, we ask the industry the need to work together, to form a common front, to push coffee in all the ways. At those days, we were very anxious about the prices, of course, the new generation in coffee. But now, after this, we see that we are in front of something that is threatening the coffee as a whole, which is coffee consumption. So today, more than ever, there's the need for us to work together, the whole chain, to do a joint effort, to maintain and sustain and increase the coffee consumption. We have to be creative, we have to be innovative, but we have to work together to increase that is so dear to all of us, which is the coffee consumption. Listen, I was just reading today the news of a new vaccine being tested in China. 4 days ago, there was a report. Already 108 people, more than 28 days without any infection. Therefore, things are moving. We may be approaching to the end sooner than we thought. So all that we are thinking now may change in a couple of months, in 3 months, in 6 months, if we find a vaccine. So again, as I've always said, these are the times of two words, uncertainty and challenges. And we have to address both of them. Today, we got a nice light from all of you, the participants, and how to give a light of this uncertainty, but we still are full of challenges in the future. I am confident that if we work together, and from the World Coffee Producers Forum, we will do our utmost to try to join forces with each and every one of you to make sure that coffee remains at the top of the agenda of all of us and at the top of the agenda of the consumers. Thank you very much. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Roberto, very much. And we're going to move to Fred Kawuma, who's going to also give us a few words and the invitation to the World Cup Producers Forum in Rwanda in July 2021.
Thank you. Thank you, Juan. I really want to thank the Colombian Coffee Federation for having taken the lead, as we have been discussing over the last few years under the World Coffee Producers Forum. We have to appreciate the role that has been played by the Colombian Coffee Federation. Thank you very much. I thank all the panelists today for your presentations. And I'll say that in these days when multilateralism seems to be taking the backstage in many circles, we as coffee producers are focused on the need for greater cooperation amongst ourselves with the significant resolve that we have to address the common challenges that we face. For many years, so much has been said about sustainability, but we see that the COVID-19 pandemic has revealed to us that much more needs to be done. And we need to address the various issues to ensure that coffee producers have a more sustainable future. In the new normal after COVID-19, we should increase the efficiency of the value chain in the producing countries. The International Coffee Organization, in its maiden World Coffee Report, which was released last year, they highlighted significant challenges faced by the global coffee value chain, amongst which was the issue of sustainability of producers. And a key concern noted there was the threat to the diversity of origins, which contribute unique flavors. And the concern, of course, is that this could eventually be lost. The fear is that there could result a concentration of origins where some producing countries might drop out. This could be the result of a number of factors, including the inability of farmers to cover their costs of production and thus abandoning coffee for other crops. We also note that urbanization has been seen to encroach on a number of coffee producing areas, and this has led to the conversion of coffee farms into real estate, industrial parks, or other high income generating investments. So cognizant of this, some African countries, we look at Kenya, for instance, where they have started moving their coffee production into new areas, hoping thereby to continue the supply of the much sought after Kenya brand into the global markets. Now, different countries have embarked on various strategies, but what is evident is that each country needs to have a national coffee sustainability plan. And this one was one of the key recommendations from the team at Columbia University, which was led by Professor Jeffrey Sachs from the study that was commissioned by the first World Coffee Producers Forum that we held in Medellin, Colombia in 2017. We also recognize that each producing country has unique factors surrounding its coffee industry, and that there will be no one-size-fits-all solutions. So, for instance, Brazil is different from Colombia, which is also different from Costa Rica or Mexico and others. The same applies to the Asian coffee-producing countries. In Africa, Ethiopia is different from Rwanda, Tanzania, and so does Uganda differ from the Ivory Coast and others. Nevertheless, in each of these countries, there are vintage coffees that certain consumers have fallen in love with. And more, of course, there's more in some than in others. But each producer country has some unique coffee stories, which are significant. There are also many lessons to learn from each other whenever we meet. So when we meet as producers, we have an opportunity to share experiences, and the hope is that these lessons will be translated into action plans that will be implemented at the national level. And this requires significant political will and financial outlays. So in Africa, the coffee value chain approach, or I should say the value chain approach, has been mooted extensively, especially after the establishment of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, where we believe that coffee will be one of the finished products that will be increasingly traded in Africa, as well as what we see as the urbanization in Africa, where coffee consumption is on the increase, and we see that this is a great opportunity in Africa. One of the aims of the World Coffee Producer Forum has been to get the interest of our political leaders to commit themselves to address the issues in their respective jurisdictions, including the enactment and implementation of policy frameworks that would enhance efficiency, farm-level productivity, and among other issues. So sometimes low priority has been accorded to farmer extension services and the support to cooperatives and farmer organizations. So while there have been concerns about food security and the need to boost agricultural productivity, we see that coffee farming systems have not been given the due attention. So at the next World Coffee Producers Forum to be held in Kigali, Rwanda, next year, July 2021, we believe that due attention will be given to Jeffrey Sachs' report and the important action plans that we need to take from that. So we are aware that efforts are being made to ensure that there will be a significant presence of African political leaders in order to get their commitments to address the coffee-related issues on the continent. And I'm sure that many other leaders will be interested. Therefore, we would like to invite you all from everywhere to come to Kigali next year for this very important event. And more details will be unveiled as time goes on, and we look forward to increased partnerships with other players in the value chain. So I want to thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you, Fred, very much for your invitation and for your wise words. One of the key things that Fred mentioned is the National Coffee Sustainability Plans, because we've been working on always saying, the chain needs to work together to achieve, to overcome the challenges we face, COVID or no COVID. However, it doesn't, you always think from the farmer to the retailer and the consumer, but there are some other actors, like the governments, and this is one of the key things. We believe that governments on the producing side should also be doing their homework and create the national coffee sustainability plans and have national strategies to make sure that the coffee sector in each country fulfill not just the needs of the market, but the needs of their communities and the population. And that's key, and that includes increased consumption in producing countries and emerging markets. And also like the certification organizations, the Reinforced Alliance and the others like that, or NGOs like the GCP or some others, or initiatives like Farmers Connect. There are different entities or links of the chain that are not the ones that you always typically think at the first glance. I think we have run out of time. We will not be able to have questions this time, unfortunately, because I know some of the panelists have some other commitments. I think it was a very, very, very interesting webinar. I want to get a commitment from all the panelists, which is that in some weeks we will get together the same group and review what we said today and see how things moved ahead. And we'll set a date together. So if you agree, let's make this informing the coffee community about what comes next, and keep them informed in this way. So if you guys agree, we will call you again and make sure that we have the exact same group together in some weeks. We have a commitment? Aye. Thank you, everybody. Good. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for all the attendees for joining us for this webinar. We hope to see you soon. We'll keep informing you if we do new webinars, all the news that we have. We'll keep you informed. And to all the members of the World Coffee Producers Forum that are listening to us, thank you for all the support. Thank you for all the work that you guys are doing from all over the world. And we'll continue working together. Thank you so much to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.